few episodes ago, I talked about ocean conservation careers and how important it was to understand that there are certain decisions in your life that will be difficult at that time, but will change the course of your career. And I wanted to get a couple people on to show examples of that. And I did that last time with McKenzie Horton, who talked about, being a science communicator and working in a job where, she's a fisheries biologist, and then she ends up doing a master's afterwards and making those decisions that went into, dedicating herself to doing a full-time job and a master's at the same time on two different subjects. But that makes her life more difficult. It makes her life a lot busier, but she does it because she loves it. And she made that hard decision and it ends up working out for her. Today on the podcast, I have another guest who's very similar in these types of decisions that she made, to be able to say, hey, what the decision I made, I'm actually looking forward to because it's led me down this really cool path. That is McKenzie Margaret. She is on the podcast today. She is known as McKenzie on TikTok and on Instagram. She's got a website out. We'll put all those links in the show notes, but I want you to hear this interview because it's a lot of fun to be able to see someone who makes decisions based on a lot of different factors in their lives, and it's turning out to look out pretty good for them no matter which path they take. So it's always great to hear from those, and I know we're all going through the same thing, so I want to talk about it on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And on today's episode, we have a great one for you. We have McKenzie Margaret, who's on the podcast. She's been on my bucket list for a while for having to be a guest on the podcast. I have this list, this ever so surprising list. I come across people, I follow them, I listen to them, I become fans of them. I try and get them on the podcast. And a lot of times they're busy because they're doing so much. The people that we all follow, the people that we see on social media, the people that we see writing a bunch of papers or doing some really incredible things on TV, or even just, anywhere we see where our platforms are, not necessarily social media, but outside of those, they tend to be pretty busy. And so they tend not to have a ton of time available. And so I'm always so grateful when people like McKenzie and Kenzie last time were able to make some time to come on the podcast and introduce them to you, right? Introduce themselves to you and me as well. And I'm able to pull their story out so that people can get their story, and then they can become bigger fans of them when they follow them on social media, if they're not already following. McKenzie is an amazing person. She has been a huge advocate of science communication, a huge advocate and supporter of sustainable seafood. She's been a huge advocate and supporter of marine scientists that are within the LGBTQ plus community. She's been a huge advocate of sharing and educating the masses on marine science in general. She's a naturalist. She loves science. She loves the ocean. She grew up in Hawaii, but I don't want to give all of it away right now. I want you to listen to the interview because she's just a wonderful person and she just loves what she does. And I think that's what oftentimes we understand, that, marine scientists and educators and science communicators are passionate, but you really get how passionate they are. But I really love the decisions that she made over her career and where it's led her currently, and how she's like, I don't regret any of it. They were tough decisions at the time. I don't regret any of it. I'm really happy with the choices I've made, and I love where my path is going now. She's a young scientist. She's going to be, is going to be an amazing scientist. She's going to be more people that follow. She's got about over 350,000 followers on TikTok, over almost 10,000 followers on Instagram. And she just continues to brighten my day every time I see a video because she puts so much work into it. And in this interview, she talks about how much work she puts into those science communication pieces, how much she puts into the decision making, what she has a plan for the future. And I can't wait for you to hear it. So here's the interview with McKenzie Margaret. I can't wait for you to listen. Enjoy, and I will talk to you after. Hey, McKenzie, welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about all things ocean science and science communication?
Of course, absolutely.
Wonderful. I am so excited for this episode. As I mentioned to you before, McKenzie, before we start recording, you have been on my guest bucket list for this podcast for quite some time now. I've been watching you on TikTok, I've watching you on Instagram for quite some time, loving your videos, loving what you've been able to do and the education that you bring, and kind of bringing to light some of the issues that I've talked about here on the podcast a number of times, and some of the stuff that it's still surprising that we still have to talk about it and we still have to engage with it. But it's good to be discussing, and we'll discuss that in this episode as well as your foray into science communication and your success into that, and how that's changed your perspective in terms of marine science and education. So can't wait to get into all that. But before we get started, McKenzie, why don't you just let the audience know who you are and what you do?
For sure. I also am very excited. That was very sweet. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm McKenzie Marguerite. I'm a marine scientist. I mostly focus right now on sustainable seafood, so fisheries and aquaculture, as well as like coastal ecology, how those things impact our coastal ecosystems. I'm a marine naturalist. I'm a science communicator. So as you said, I create a lot of videos on TikTok, on Instagram in order to bring in the general public onto what we're doing in the science world. I feel like we don't do a very good job of that a lot of the time. So I'm trying my best to bridge that gap as best as possible. Yeah.
I love it. And you're doing a great job. Doing a fantastic job. And I'm not the only one who thinks that too. I know there's a lot of people who think that, and all your followers who think that as well, which you've amassed quite a few, which is wonderful. How did it all start? Like where did this story begin of you wanting to become a marine scientist?
Oh, I always loved the ocean. I was always a water person. My family called me Little Fish growing up because I was just always a water person. And so when I was in high school, I went to high school in Hawaii. I went on this, my high school was right on the side of Diamond Head. We could see the ocean all the time. And so I took a class, like a marine biology high school class. Absolutely loved it. It was spectacular. And then when I was going into my undergrad, I didn't grow up with a lot of financial security. And of course I went to a private high school and I was a scholarship student. So I was surrounded by a lot of people who did have that financial security. And I was like, I want that. That's something that I would desire in my life. And so when I was making the decision on what to do, that was a huge factor for me. And so I originally went into school for forensics. So like my little degree here is in forensics.
Yeah, there you go.
I have a degree in forensic science. You can see it at the bottom there. It says forensics. Because I went in for forensics because I was like, that is the thing that will get me paid. That's the thing that will be financially secure for me. And so I did about a year, and one of my professors came up to me and was like, hey, you're a great scientist. You do really well. You're a good student. You're a good scientist. You seem miserable. Like you seem miserable in what you're doing.
Oh, no.
This does not seem like you are happy. Like you're just here and you're just doing it. And she was like, is that something that you genuinely want? Like, is that what you want? Like, you are picking a career that you're going to do every single day for the rest of your life. Like, yes, it'll bring you financial security, but are you going to be okay with being a bit miserable, a bit not having fun, not enjoying? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I would like that financial security. So I don't know. That's a really tough call. It's a really hard thing for like a 19-year-old to decide.
Well, you're deciding like the rest of your life. And you've been through, some financial difficulties in the past, and you're like, well, look, I just want to be able to pay my bills, enjoy my life. But good on this professor for kind of calling it out. You're doing well. The professor could have just said, I'm just going to keep her going through and let's see how they do. And you're like, okay, but then call you up and be like, hey, look, like, what do you think?
She was very sweet. And I think about her all the time because she also made me her TA. Like she was an incredible professor. Shout out to you, Dr. Cogbill. But she was just kind of like, I don't know. Like, because my plan was always to like do forensics and then like have the ocean be my like side thing, the thing that I like volunteer on the weekends. And that like is like, because there's always been that also advice that people have given you that like, don't make your passion like your career. Like a lot of people that like love to cook, like don't become a chef because then it kind of ruins your love of cooking because you're doing it all the time. And so that was kind of my mentality, was like, I don't want to do this all the time because I don't want to lose my love. My love will be on the side. I'll make my money. I'll be able to do the things. That was kind of my plan. And she was like, I understand all of that. And she was like, well, how about for the summer? We have, I went to a small private university in Hawaii. It's called Chaminade. And the dean of my department was really close friends with this incredible woman named Dr. Ruth Gates. Dr. Ruth Gates, very, very big name in the coral industry. And they were really close friends. And Dr. Gates was out of UH, so out of the University of Hawaii. And they had never had somebody from my university go to her lab. that had never happened because she only really accepted UH students. But because her and my dean were friends, were really close friends, she was like, I will give you one student to send to my lab as a tester student. And if that goes well, you can send more students.
No pressure.
So no pressure. So I became that student.
Right,
Was
right.
asked to be that student. Was like, hey,
Yeah.
do you want to go be that student? Be the example. And I was like, sure. You know what? It was on Coconut Island, which, if anybody, I'm sure this is like way too dated of a reference for some people, but Gilligan's Island.
Right.
That was where that was filmed, is Coconut Island. Yeah. And that's where the institute is. That's where the Hawaii Institute for Marine Biology is. Gotcha. And so I was like, well, why not? Like, I can go out to HIMB and go sit on the island. You have to take a little boat out there. I was like, sure, I can go spend the summer on a little island, I guess.
Not bad.
Yeah. So I did. And I remember my first day there, they were touring me around. The woman, her name was Dr. Holly Putnam. She was Ruth Gates' PI, like one of her head researchers, and she was touring me around. She was doing all of this stuff. She was talking to me about like ocean acidification and the impacts on coral, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know any of this. Like, I've been so focused on forensics that I've missed so much of what's going on. And the very first day I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm not going back. This is it. This is what I'm doing. And so I didn't change my degree just because I was paying for it for myself. And in order to do that would extend the time that I was there. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to financially pull that off. But I did, turn all of my research into marine research. I got a minor in chemistry. And so I did a lot of stuff within the field, and that allowed me to continue on from marine biology afterwards. So
what an opportunity, though, right? Like, if you think about it, like, you're the first student that was ever accepted from a different university. And like, you had the passion, obviously, and you had the ability to do it. That wasn't a question, but like, what an opportunity, because it never happened before. That professor, pulls you out and just be like, hey, I think you might be good for this opportunity. You do it, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm never going back.
Yeah.
How difficult was it to infuse like the marine science part into your forensics, type of work, like with all your coursework and projects and stuff like that? That couldn't have been easy.
It wasn't as difficult as I think it would seem. There's actually a lot more crossover than you would imagine. So learning genetics and learning all of this in stuff, it was very useful for what I was doing. I ended up doing a lot of genetic work on coral. And so I was able to kind of cross those things over. Of course, there was things like learning fingerprints that I was like, I'm never going to need to do this. but it's also just like useful to have. And then one of the things that I always talk about that was really, really interesting, that really crossed over for me, was I learned a lot about law. Like, a good portion of learning forensics was learning law. And so learning law, learning policies, learning how all of this comes into place helped me understand how environmental stuff comes into place, how environmental policies are utilized, what we do as far as when people are breaking environmental laws, or how those things go about, was actually quite useful. And it's something that I still use to this day, of being like, I actually know how this process works. So I could, so it's a lot, there was a lot more crossover than I think a lot of people would realize. They seem very, very opposite, but at the same time, science has a lot, and it's an undergraduate degree, right? So there is just kind of, it's a basis of science. So that kind of helps. Sure.
When I think a lot of people think that you have to go and do your undergrad in marine biology. And I think that's a huge myth within the industry. Like, sure, biology helps. A science degree helps, whether it's chemistry, whether it's physics, whether it's biology. It could be really anything. You could technically go to arts, maybe have to do a couple of courses if you want to go into graduate work. But like, you really just need the basics at that point. And you can, if you decide to go to grad school, or if you decide to go and do a job, you have the science degree. It doesn't make it too difficult to transfer that knowledge over, especially if you've done most of your projects on marine stuff. And I like the idea of trying to be creative, really, biting into the genetics aspect of coral, because you're learning something that needs to be learned anyway. It's not as if it's information that doesn't need to be learned or researched. And so you're able to do that. and then you almost become creative. You can use that as a bit of on the resume as, look, I went into a forensics degree and I use marine science to do it. Like, don't tell me I'm not creative when I'm able to do that. I love that aspect. So when you graduated there, what was your next step? You have all this marine science, you're now infused with it, you're inspired by it, you've had the opportunities, you're living in like paradise, like in Hawaii. I say this from someone who just visited there, but I say this as someone who always loved Hawaii. And what was the next steps? Like, what was your thought process when you graduated?
First I wanted to give like a little piece of advice for people that are looking into it. Something that I wish somebody had told me is that if you are interested in science at all, like go into your undergrad with a general science degree, go for like biology or biochem or something along those lines, and then do internships and do research in the different fields that you're interested in, because you never know what you're going to like until you're actually doing it. I thought I was going to love forensics. I thought that was going to be such a cool, investigative, very creative. And then I kind of discovered that's not what it was, that my idea of what forensic was not real. And so, I didn't know that until I was actively in it. So my little piece of advice I always try and give is that just do something general and practice and go for as many internships and see what you really like, because then you can specialize in graduate school and you can move on from there. Yeah.
And you can even major in things in undergrad too, if you decide to do it later. Yeah. I went in with an agricultural science program, and I ended up switching over to like a marine biology degree afterwards. So like you can always go in different places. Yeah. Just know what kind of courses you're interested in, or what interests you at the time, and it might change. I think that's a great piece of advice. I love that.
But what I did afterwards, so I actually graduated in 2015 with my undergrad. So if you can remember the timeline, that was the year of our first Trump presidency, was 2016, I believe. Yeah. So I was starting a graduate program at UH, actually with Dr. Ruth Gates' lab. So I was doing something with her lab. I started a graduate program at UH. And then Trump presidency came into play, and funding got really, really finicky. A lot of funding was lost through the university. And I got this letter one day that was like, hey, we've reevaluated your portfolio, and we are now basically tripling your tuition. And my stipend through my university wouldn't have covered it.
Tripling.
It was nearly tripled. It was, wow. It went, it was a crazy letter to receive. And so I had this like, wow, okay, that's insane. And I remember I went to this protest, like maybe 2 months after that. And I had this sign that said, girls just want to have funding for their research. Because I was like, it's crazy how quickly I lost funding and how quickly it all happened. And so I tried originally to do all of it, to do the research, and then to also get a job. And the job that I got was being a marine naturalist.
Okay.
So that's how
in Hawaii,
on like boats. Yeah. Okay. Like on like touring boats with the tourists. And I really loved it. And unfortunately it was too much. And I did end up having to drop out of my program, which still makes me sad to this day, but that's how life goes. You never know what life's going to throw at you. And there's always something that's around the corner that you don't know about. And I think that for me, that was being a marine naturalist. I started being a marine naturalist. I became a humpback naturalist. I worked for this company that allowed me to transfer to another island. So I grew up on Oahu, and then my partner and I got an opportunity to move to the Big Island. So we moved to the Big Island for 1.5 years, and I was working on a submarine there, which was a very popular thing that I've talked about on Instagram or on TikTok and Instagram. So that's where I worked on the submarine as a naturalist and as a co-pilot. And then we ended up, leaving Hawaii altogether because my goal was always to go back to school. I always wanted to return. And it was kind of one of those things my partner and I were like, if we want to do this, we're going to have to leave the most expensive state in the United States. It is a very expensive place. We were both working full-time jobs. She even had a second job just to afford to live, right? You don't really get to see each other. There's not, there's a lot. So it was kind of one of these things that was like, if this is really your goal, if this is really what you want, then you're going to have to give up being home. And it was kind of this conversation that I was like, you're right. And so we left. And then unfortunately there was a pandemic. So that also set us back a little
Didn't help.
bit.
Didn't help.
No, that didn't help.
No.
But I got to like spend time with my grandma. We took care of my grandma for 2 years. And so I always really value that time as well.
For sure.
There's times for you to be an active scientist, and there's times for you to be an active community member and an active member of like your family and those sorts of things. And that was my time, was to be an active member of my family and to give my grandma her last 2 years at the home that she wanted to be in. So that's what I did. I was in the pandemic, and I had already started TikTok, but I really had started TikTok because people had told me that that was like where the lesbians were. They were like, that's where the lesbians are going. And I was like, if you tell me the lesbians are there, I'm going.
Yeah. It's the community. That's awesome.
Yeah. If you're telling me that my people are there, I'm going. Okay. So that's kind of what I started it as, was just like lesbian thirst traps and like trying to make community with my people. Right. And it was during the pandemic. And I remember this very specific video that I was like, well, since we're all stuck inside, let me teach you something. Let me teach you about some coral. And I made this little video about coral and what coral bleaching is and what white coral could be, that it's not necessarily dead. It was like, and people were so interested in it. They were like, I didn't know I need this information. And I was like, oh, wait a second. All that work that I have done in person as a naturalist, which, you know, was very interesting because I grew up with the ocean. I grew up waking up and seeing the ocean. And you don't understand that when you're younger. You don't understand how special that is. You just think that's normal.
Somebody's at the door.
I think so.
Love dogs in this podcast. No problem.
Delivery, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I didn't understand how special that was. And then working as a naturalist kind of showed me that. It showed me how people don't grow up with the ocean. Sometimes people were coming on that boat, having seen the ocean. This was their first time out on the ocean, seeing things, learning about fish, learning about whales. Sure. And it was those moments that I was like, oh, wow, I can connect people with the ocean. I can help people develop this relationship that will then foster into them caring, which will then foster them into them taking actions. And it was that video where I talked about coral, and people were so interested that I was like, oh, wait a second, I can do this online. I can take all those things that I was doing in person and bring that online. And so I just started creating these videos about the knowledge that I had and about marine science and about being in marine science. And it just became this really wonderful career in science communication.
Well, it's just amazing. There's a few things that you said there, like, and we'll get into the science communication in a sec, because this is where I really want to riff with you on this, because it's so important. You made some pretty big decisions, like after you graduated.
Yeah.
And it's insane to think about how many scientists, marine scientists, when we become marine scientists, we dream of like either working in Australia or working in a place like Hawaii, right? And then here it is, it's too expensive for marine biologists, like homegrown marine biologists, to live there, to do the work that they would love in an island that they know, and that they have to go somewhere else to do it. I just feel like that's very weird. It should not happen in a way. You know what I mean? Like it should be a place where you can go and enjoy, especially because, and I know just from your, like, especially from your videos, like, you know, the culture, you know, like, you know, the significance of everything. And I think that's important for scientists to be able to do that. So I'm sorry you had to make that decision to go to do that. But even moving to even the decision to move, like, the other thing actually is to be a naturalist on a boat, and like to dive into that. Do you regret the decision of getting that job and working in that job? Because it seems like it's really paying off right now in terms of just being able to do what you want to do, you know, on TikTok and on Instagram and on science communication. Like, do you regret that?
No, I think there's, like, I've always learned, and like the lessons I've learned is that there's always something that you don't know about. Right. Like right now I'm waiting to hear about a graduate program, right? And you're on the edge of your seat, constantly checking your email. Like, oh, am I going to get the email today? Is it coming in today? And I know it's coming in any day now. Right. Like, it's happening soon. And, you know, I try and remind myself that no matter what happens with it, if that door doesn't open, there's another door that I don't see right now. There's a window, there's a door, there's something else that I am not noticing. And that's kind of how I feel about the marine naturalist thing, is that I took it as originally of like, I know enough that I can teach people, and it's something that will give me some money. Cool.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize where it would take me. And so at the time, yeah, for sure. At the time I was like,
decision.
it was a hard decision. I was so tired. I was so overworked. And so of course at the time it was like, man, was this the right choice? I feel a little bit overwhelmed and overworked. But now in retrospect, of course, I'm like, wow, that gave me so many tools that I didn't realize I needed for a career that I really loved. I had always wanted to do science communication. I didn't even know what that really was though, right? Like I'd always just wanted to teach. I'd always just wanted to help people connect to the ocean. I'd always wanted to be a part of that, but I didn't know it was called science communication. I didn't know that there was an actual career or job in it. Like there was like none of that was information that I understood until it was kind of happening. And I was like, oh, okay, this is all the blocks are coming and they're building to something. I just wasn't able to see what the structure was until I took a step back. So no, yes, it was a hard decision, and there's always a part of you that likes to if and but about things, right? What could have been, what would have been. But now I think I'm very thankful. I actually was just talking to quite a few other science friends about this, particularly women in science. We kind of, it's hard to be a woman in science. I think everybody can see that. We tend to be overlooked quite a bit. And one of the things that I was talking to quite a few of my friends about is that, we get these opportunities for research, and sometimes you just want to take them because you're like, well, I got an opportunity, I want to take it. That's cool. I'm a woman in science that got an opportunity given to you. I want to take it. But then you have to think about, is this actually research that I want to be doing? Is this actually what I want to be specialized? Is this going to help me in the long run? And so those things are kind of what I, try and reflect on. And the research that I was involved in was really interesting and really cool, but it's not, I don't think, what I would have wanted to be doing in the long term. So would that have benefited me in the long term is kind of one of those things that I try and remind myself.
Right.
And, I think a lot of times we kind of pigeonhole ourselves into this is the opportunity that I got. And so now I'm just doing exactly this. Yeah. But now I, have had such a passion now for sustainable seafood and for fisheries and aquaculture and all of these things that I wouldn't have been able to be involved in had I gone down that path, or it would have been a hard pivot from that path. So I think, like I said, I think there's always something on the horizon that you just can't see, and that you gotta trust in the universe a little bit sometimes, which doesn't feel good, but you gotta try and do it.
For sure. I just recently did an episode on conservation careers, and I mentioned that. Sometimes those decisions are really hard at the time because you have no idea where it's going to take you, but then there's no really right or wrong decision. As long as you're not hurting anybody, there's no real right or wrong decision. Whatever the decision is, that's your path. It was meant to be, and then you just go ahead and do it, and you make the best of it. Oftentimes, it ended up benefiting you in the end. You do science communication. I assume we'll talk about it in a second. You've got some opportunities, available to you that you probably wouldn't have had if you didn't start the science communication, right? And I've had the same opportunity. I've had similar opportunities or similar, different opportunities with podcasting that have come to me where I would have predicted this if it hadn't happened. And I think it kind of opens up our mind a little bit, forces us a little bit to do it, but opens up our mind. So I really like that. The other thing you mentioned earlier, which I think is really important too, is obviously your partner plays a big role in your life. Life partner, she's there to do, you guys are living it together, there's compromise to happen. She moved with you to the Big Island, and she moved with you again after that. Obviously that's an amazing thing to do, right? To go, hey, if you want to do this and we got to move away, let's go ahead and do this. How important is that to you to have that support there to do that? And was it a difficult decision for her to say, yeah, let's go to these places? It can't be an easy thing, right?
I will say, first off, it was not a difficult decision for her. She is so much of the let's explore the world. I want to get out there. I want to do things. Nice. So I don't feel bad about that whatsoever, because I think I'm the one who struggled with it more. I'm the one I want to be home, and she's like the things that you want and the goals that you have in mind to do are not aligning right now. You need to figure it out. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. You might have a good point there. So yeah, she's the one that likes to explore and to get out there and be things. So no, that wasn't necessarily the issue, but I do think having a strong support system is so essential, particularly if you're doing like digital science communication. I think we touched on this before we started recording. Of people can be the online community can be a lot. It can be really tough. You know, the words that you say can get misconstrued so easily. People can take things out of context, take a singular sentence from a whole video out of context, and it can snowball into something else. And so having a really strong support system is necessary. This is one of the things that I get asked all the time at conferences. People are like, how do you do everything? How do you go to school and do research and do science communication and like keep your head above water? And I'm like, I have a really strong support system, not just my partner, but also like I have some really incredible best friends that are always there and, you know, who I can call for pretty much anything. And I am very lucky in that way to have such an incredible, strong support system. And I think that is an essential part of being in like conservation or being in advocacy, particularly if you're doing it digitally, because like my partner is not an online person. She doesn't have social media. She doesn't do any of that. No, that's not her thing whatsoever. She is very private, keeps to herself. And that is so lovely for me, because there's times where I'm like, God, I hate this. I hate everybody. Like, I'm just so miserable. I'm so mad. And she's like, put your phone down. Like,
sometimes you need to be called out that way.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Like, put your phone down. Let's go for a walk. Like, let's go feel some sunshine on your skin. I'm like, oh yeah. You're probably right.
Just a little reminder, right? A little check. Yeah.
And so I think that's very important. Like, it's not necessarily that you have to have somebody that's offline as much as I do, but I think it's important to have somebody that reminds you of these things, that reminds you to be like, hey, you are going into a place of like letting the internet rot your brain a little bit. Like, the internet is getting inside you. You need to go outside. You need to go look at the ocean and remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. And you're like, oh yeah, you're 100% correct. And so I feel very lucky to have that. Even the other day I was on FaceTime with one of my best friends, and somebody on Threads made one of those comments that just drives me absolutely bonkers, where they were like, if you're not vegan, you're not an environmentalist. And I was like, I am coming for you. And so I like, you know,
we need to have a discussion.
Yeah. So, you know, me and my little contacts, and everyone's commenting, and, you know, we were watching our like favorite show together. That's what we were doing on FaceTime. And I brought up Threads, and she could see it on my face that I was reading, and I was getting angry. And she was like, put the keyboard warriors away, like put them away. Stop. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Okay.
Well, because it's difficult sometimes, and I'm right there with you. Like, sometimes I read comments, even if it's on other people's posts, and I'm just like, I have the need to say something. But it gets me charged up. You know, and I coach my girls' hockey team, and we have a rule in it where it's like the 24-hour rule. Where it's like, after a game, no parent can come up and like yell at you or anything like that. They have to give 24 hours to like calm themselves down, then they can talk to you after that. Great rule, should be in all sports, and usually it is. I feel like it almost should be for social media too. It's like, if I see a comment, I'm just like, oh, this is gonna get me angry. I'm gonna get emotional about this. And then my wife's like, just leave it, put it down. Like, no. wait 24 hours, and then if that comment's still gonna be there. And then you can get after it that way, right? Yeah. Like, it's difficult though sometimes.
Oh, it's so hard
to not react, right?
Yeah.
But when you do, like, you've had some posts of your own where, you know, I'm sure you get comments on it, especially when you're talking about LGBTQ plus, and it's, you know, it's a hard thing to, like, you want to talk about it because you want to get your opinions out, and then people are commenting some pretty hateful comments or you know, some pretty just not nice comments, and you respond to it. But you always respond to it in such a way, you look like, you know, you're calm. You almost like, it feels, and maybe you're not. It's what it seems to me when I watch it. But you're like almost approaching it like a scientist. You're like, let's just look at let's be reasonable here. Here's the situation. Here's what people are going through, and this is why you're talking about it. Can you just kind of talk us through when you do a post like that and respond? Like, is it one of those things where you wait 24 hours and then you kind of respond, or like, how do you look so calm? I don't know if you are or not, but how do you look so calm and respond that way?
I would say I'm calm like 80% of the time. If you actually look at some of the videos, there's some of them that I get a little heated, I get a little frustrated.
Okay.
Um,
Understandably so
yeah,
too.
there's a
Yeah.
few, and funny enough, it's the ones that I get frustrated that people like don't listen, and I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I should be a little bit more calm, because I, like you said, I do get caught up in it sometimes where I'm just like,
Right.
I can't deal with you right now, and then
Right.
I lose my cool a little bit, but
Absolutely.
that is the ones where I have resources and I have I am a bit more calm, and I do come at it from a very scientific perspective that people understand a little bit better. So I try and remember that. It doesn't always work.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. I have my moments. But I really try to remind myself that, like, when you come at things with data points and with genuine perspectives and with the actual experiences that queer people have experienced, people are a better time listening. But also, there's people that don't want to listen. There's people
Yeah.
that don't care. No matter how much data you have, no matter how much you articulate your point, they don't want to listen.
Mhm.
And I've definitely experienced that in I think it was last month or the month before that. I was talking about a couple of girls who are in Hawaii who are very anti-LGBTQ, but
Mhm.
are also marine conservationists. And I'm like, this is a genuine problem that we experience in the marine conservation field. Is we have a lot of anti-LGBTQ people, which their sentiments, their mentalities can leak into policies and legislations. And that's a huge issue. And I've seen it within, when we're at conservation conferences, I've seen those things be kind of brought up, those prejudice be
Mhm.
kind of infiltrate into actual policy building. And so it's a problem that we need to be addressing. And of course, those two, the two that I was mainly talking to, didn't want to hear it, didn't want to care, didn't
Yeah.
have any opinion. But it was the other people, right? All the others, all the others that were listening were like, oh, I didn't realize how big of an issue this was. I didn't
Mhm.
realize that so many of the people that I support and that I like find, my information from have a negative perspective of like my community, the people that's
Yeah.
who I am. So I think I understand how important of a topic it is to be discussing. So I try
Yeah.
and remind myself of that. So I'm like, remain calm,
Yeah.
articulate your point. This is
Yeah.
a really important conversation. And again, I
Yeah.
am not perfect. It doesn't always go, it doesn't always work. Like, if you really look at those times, there is one video where I have lost it. I lost my cool. But you know what? Where it happens. And that's just what you have to do. And
Yeah.
not necessarily like, that's not necessarily that's something that everyone has to do. But I think with the platform that I have, and with developing that platform, like I said, I developed that platform. That platform got built off the lesbians. It was
Mhm.
on the back. That's how I got there. That's how the first 100K came about. Was the like my backbone of my community, of my marine conservation area,
Yeah.
are lesbians. So therefore, my
Yeah.
I need to stand up for my community. Like, the queer community are the people that are there, like, lifting me up. Therefore, I have
Mhm.
to turn around and do the same, and I feel the
Yeah.
responsibility to do that. So that's why it's very important to me. Like I said, I can't always come at it with a calm demeanor, but I try
And
my best.
understandably too. I mean, it's very frustrating to watch. Sometimes even like cis male, white guy, middle age. I try to do my best to keep my mind open and make sure that I do my best to keep everybody around me inclusive, and that everybody's I could be approachable, right? And but like, it's true. Like, when you watch some of those things, it's amazing. But like, I learn from these videos as well, right? I learn about some of the policies where you're just like, I never would have thought about that. And it's just out of ignorance. It's not out of malicious, behavior. It's just like, oh, never thought of that. Well, that makes sense. And then you start putting it together. If I'm ever in a position where I have influence on that, and same with other people. I mean, look, you have over 350,000 followers on TikTok, which is absolutely phenomenal. But not everybody is anti-LGBTQ, as you mentioned. A lot of them, a lot of your followers are from the lesbian community. So it's like, hey, like, they got my back and they understand. But I think it's also important to realize, and I do this sometimes too with in different aspects. When people talk about climate change and conservation, they say some things that aren't true. It's like, I'm not there to refute just what you're saying. I'm there to educate the other people who look at the comments or who look at my posts or whatever that might be. That's important for science communication. I don't think we realize that, and that could cause conflict for
Yeah.
us in the future by the very people that you're responding to. but you're really not responding to them. And you're really responding more to like, hey, by the way, for those of you who really want to know, this is what climate change is, or this is what some of the policies that are put in place that we need to change. And I think that's the important part from a scientific point of view that I get out of it. And I hope, I assume, you do as well. I think that's an important part, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
it's always about the people that you don't realize are watching.
Right. Now, when you do your videos, you talk a lot about a lot of different things, right? Mm-hmm. We talk about the LGBTQ community, especially within marine science. You talk about your naturalist stuff. I'm looking at a video right now. I see starfish. I see, I'm just watching the clips right now. But it that's your naturalist coming out, that experience coming out. And you do education on I'm looking at dive tips and when you went back home and there's been a lot of submarine reports come out over the last few years. You have that experience with submarines. Do you when you wake up every day, do you have an idea of what you're going to post, or do you plan that out ahead of time to just being this is what I'm going to talk about today, and how is that influenced by what you see around you?
I think I always have a plan, and the plan tends to always go awry. So I've really learned over the past 4 years that I have a whole list of things that I'm here are content pieces that I would love to talk about. I have lists in my phone, I have lists in my planner, I have lists everywhere of here's a content idea, which I think is really useful on those days that you're I don't know what to talk about. There's nothing that's come about. I don't have anything. Wait, let me go reference this whole list of things, of ideas that I have that I can make something based off of.
Right.
But a lot of the times, it'll be I want to record this today, and then I'll open or I'll open TikTok, and I have 40 tags, and I'm what is going on? And it's something that people are can you talk about this? Can you reference this? What is this person referring to? And I'm hold on, okay, I gotta put what I was going to talk about on the back burner for a second, put it back on my list, address this. So I tend to see that sometimes I have plans, sometimes I'm this will be this day, this will be this day, and sometimes that works out, but oftentimes I find that it's what my audience wants to hear, what they're asking for. Okay, let me address that first. So it really depends. And I've learned that plan to make content, don't necessarily always be planning on what that content's going to be. I have scripts for things that I haven't recorded yet, because I will make the script, I'll get on TikTok, and there's something else that needs to be addressed. Okay, we're going to focus on that instead. Yeah. So there's
but
always
you always have those as a backup if you need it too, right? That's always nice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's always days that there's nothing going on in the ocean world. That's not true. There's always something going on in the ocean world, but nothing on TikTok, right?
Yeah.
Nothing that the TikTok audience have grabbed onto quite yet. Right. So those days, I have things. I have lots of stuff that I can talk about. I have lots of things that I can bring up. I have lots of content that I can produce. But there's also days that you just got to listen to what people want to hear and listen to the questions that people are asking.
And that's an important aspect, especially to social media. It is supposed to be social, right? It's supposed to be engaging. And if you engage with some of your followers, or even if they haven't followed you, but they've watched your videos before, because that can happen on TikTok, they're tagging you in this hey, Kenzie, I'd love to hear about this. I want to hear about this. What are your thoughts? And I think that's really important to address, almost right off the bat, as soon as you see it, just be oh yeah, this is something that I want to be able to talk about, to answer it and clear things up. Obviously, people want some clarification or a response or something like that. I think that's a great idea. Now, when you're looking at these videos, how long does it take you to make a video? I'm just curious, because they're short form, but they're really not short form in the making.
It depends on what the topic is. If it's a little bit more fun, the teaching people how to a couple of dive tips I had for people, that I think it took me 45 minutes, because I was also getting footage, right? I was I gotta grab a couple of videos of me so I can show exactly what I'm talking about. So gotta grab, thinking about those things, right? Gotta dig through my videos, find the video that I'm referring to, pull that out, get it on, do all of that. Of course, I watch back as I'm making my TikTok, because for me, I have pride in using my phones until they absolutely die. So I still have, I think this is an iPhone 11, which means that sometimes there's glitches, right?
Yes.
Sometimes it doesn't always grab the audio or whatever. So I try and watch as I go, not every single clip, but a couple clips. Okay, watch, did all the audio work? Was there any glitches? And sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes there's a glitch. Okay, got to re-record that piece. Okay, try. And so I try and give myself time. So I think that one took me about 45 minutes. But then it depends, if it's a topic about something that's a research piece or a question that people are asking, I try and put a lot of effort into researching the question and making sure that like what I'm talking about is
Yeah.
the most recent and updated version. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes,
Yeah.
you know, that's the thing about science that that I'm trying to break with being a science communicator is how difficult it can be and how exclusionary. Is that the right word? You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can be very, hard to find. Like that, it's behind a paywall. It's, here in Canada, we have different regulations on what news you can access because they were trying to, they were trying to mitigate the spread of misinformation, but that in order to do so, they just kind of put a blanket over everything.
Over everything, it makes it a little difficult.
Makes it a little difficult. So, sometimes it's even difficult for scientists to find the most updated information, right? There's always something coming out. There's a new paper every single day. So I try and do my best to find the most recent information, to look and see what I'm looking at. So that can take time. That alone can take a few hours to make sure that I am reading the most, updated things and combing through papers. That is so difficult sometimes. The way scientists write is so convoluted. I'm like, we need to make abstracts something that like a regular person could read.
Yes.
And that would be beneficial.
Yes.
Like I get that like there's 2 or 3 sentences about the actual what you did that's not gonna make sense to people that like don't actually know what you're involved. That I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But like for the most part, your abstract should be able to be digestible for a general audience.
You almost need a blog for abstracts.
Really,
right? Like
truly.
a blog form for abstracts.
Yeah, truly. And like, I think some grace for your actual methods and methodologies, because that's just how things are. But man, sometimes I'm like, do we have to use the thesaurus for every single word? Is that necessary? And it's just sometimes it drives me absolutely bonkers because I'm like, if I'm struggling with this, I have like nearly 10 years of science experience. If I'm struggling, can you imagine a regular person trying to research this and trying to figure out the answer? They're not going to get there. They're also going to have to pay like $700 because it's every paper is behind a paywall. Like, lucky enough, I work for a university right now, so I get access to a certain amount of papers. Even then, there's still some that are behind paywalls for me.
And let's be honest, like these subscriptions for the universities pay are like in the tens of thousands of dollars per publisher. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. It's insane. And I think that's what takes me the most time is really combing through all of that science. So, and then obviously like writing my script, kind of going over it, because that's I think one of the hardest parts about science communication is trying to double check your own biases of what words and what things make, like, I know that like my general audience is not going to know. Cause sometimes I'll use terminologies that I am just so used to that I'm like, oh, everyone's going to know that. And then then all of a sudden people are like, what the fuck are you saying? And you're like, oh yeah, sorry. I realize now that like that's not a common term. That's not something, that's not a vocab word that everyone got to have in high school. That is something that I've just like been ingrained with so hard that I think everybody knows now, but that's not true.
Oh yeah. I always get caught up in the acronyms because there are times where I've used the acronym so much I don't know what it stands for anymore. It's just the acronym because I know what the acronym is.
For sure. Every time I say NOAA and people are like, what does NOAA stand for? I'm like, it's the place with the oceans and the atmosphere.
I know they're in there somewhere.
Yeah, they're somewhere in there. Like I definitely understand. And like for me, NOAA is like that acronym is so you know what I'm talking about. I assume that you know what I'm saying. Yeah. But you do say that to a regular person, they're like, what are you talking about? Like,
you almost see their face go, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, again, that's one of those words that we have because of the experience that we have. We know it so well. We don't even think about it anymore, but most people really don't know what that is and don't know what they do. That's probably one of the hardest parts is like, yes, combing through the science, and then I got to build the script a little bit, and then I got to relook at the script and be like, okay, what in here am I missing? What in here is not going to make sense to somebody, and what should I elaborate on a little bit? And it can even just be one little sentence, right? NOAA, the American Oceans and Atmosphere Organization. boom,
Yeah.
that's done. That covers it. But sometimes you forget to do those things.
Oh,
So
I know.
I try and comb through it all and then record. Then of course you gotta edit, you gotta do all of that. And I like try and use green screens and that stuff because I try and make it visually appealing to my audience as well, which is, where people are losing their attention span. So you got to keep the attention span.
Even with short videos, you got to switch it up.
Switch it up. And so getting the pictures, editing the pictures to be the right size for TikTok, all of that takes quite a bit of time. It takes a lot more time than people realize, I think. Yeah.
100%. And I think also with the evolution of TikTok in terms of the time limits that they offer, first used to be 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Then it became 60 seconds, then 3 minutes, now 10 minutes. How hard was it for you to get all the information into 1 minute? Did you do a lot of like part 1, part 2, part 3, like that type of content?
Absolutely. The minute limit was tough. Like I really love the 3 minutes because I think I can get a good piece in to 3 minutes, even like 2 minutes, but 3 minutes gives me the leisure of, okay, I can edit down a little bit. I can kind of scramble around. But when it was a minute strict, you could hear me like the last 2 clips being like, and this, just like trying to like shove 4 sentences into the last 10 seconds. Cause you're out of time and there's no leeway. There's there's nothing. You're cut off at 60 seconds. So now I appreciate that those are a little bit more, like I usually just go straight to the 10-minute feature. And I rarely go over 3 minutes. But having that 10 minutes of time lets me play around a little bit, right? Lets me, okay, what can I edit down? What can I take out? What can be moved around? And it also gives you the ability to kind of like stop too, right? Like, because you can clip off those little pieces. You can take a breath, take your sentence. Okay, click. Whereas before you were like click, 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 click.
Yeah, all the time.
Like, go. I appreciate that we've kind of moved a little bit as far as editing on TikTok to have a little bit more space and time. I try and not go over because I notice now, like, a lot of my content is very educational, very science based, that like, if it's too long, I'm going to lose people. They can only, they're on TikTok because they want to have fun. They want to scroll a little bit. Sure. They want to, they're like, oh yeah, I'll sit for a minute and learn. That's nice. I'll learn something new today. Yeah. But like a quick piece of learning something new is kind of, what people are going for. So I try and find that sweet spot of like, how do I make sure I'm getting you the right information, the correct information that you can understand and utilize, but also in an entertaining way that's not going to go over your time limit of your brain. So it's a real tricky balance that we're constantly trying to kind of figure out and work with. Yeah,
absolutely. It's kind of funny, and you're not only trying to do that, but you're trying to learn the software. Do you edit all on your phone? Is that what you're saying? Like you do it all on your phone?
I edit mostly on my phone. I do have CapCut and stuff on my computer, but I find it like I take most of my footage on my phone, so I like the idea of loading on. It's just easy to just upload from my phone and edit from there. So that's kind of what I mostly do it from. I have played around with it on my laptop, but also like, I'm a scientist. On my laptop, I have like R running. There's like, I think I have like 10 fucking research papers open right now. The second I open my laptop, all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta write that paper. Oh yeah, I gotta do all of this.
There's a lot of reminders.
Yeah. So I'm like, when I'm on my phone, like this is my science communication world. This is my research world, so they're a bit different. Yeah.
That's hilarious. It's so true too. I have like so many tabs open. A lot of times when I record, all of a sudden, like my computer's like, we're just chugging here. You need to like close a lot of these tabs. I'm like, I only have like 400 open. I don't understand why it's taking so long. But I completely get it. I learned editing on my laptop. So like going to the phone, I'm just like, this is not easy. Like doing text and everything like that. I'm like, I have to scroll. And of course, every font that I like is the lowest on the scroll.
Oh, for sure.
And you're just like, come on, like, and then you have to find it all the time. Anyway, but I respect the editing on the phone because I have such a hard time doing it. It's not easy. That takes a while to get used to, I imagine. But you do such a great job because you do like, it's not just like you're just talking into the camera all the time. Like there's some where it's like a day in the life of, and all those types of like vloggy type of content that take a while to go through because then you have to do the voiceover as you're putting them all through and that. So the editing is a vibe for sure because it's not as if it's easy to do. It always takes time because you have to pay attention to every single detail. And I think
Absolutely.
that's great. But look, this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I like those pieces because I like to remind people that I'm a human. I think that like a lot of the times people get on see scientists online and they're like, that's what they are. They're a scientist and they just know all. They are an omnipotent scientist. And I'm like, I am a human. I am
first
just
and foremost.
First and foremost, I am just a human. I'm just a girl that likes the ocean and studies the ocean. Like, I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna say things that are incorrect sometimes. Science is constantly changing. I am just a human that is trying my best. And so I like making those pieces, even though they can be kind of tedious because, like you said, you got to go through, you got to make that voiceover, you got to do all of those things. Yeah. But I think it reminds people that there's a human aspect to it. And that was one of the biggest things when I got a management team for my science communication. I was like, I am not becoming like the commercial person. I am not becoming this like one entity. Like that's never who I'm going to be. Like I need the internet to remember that I am just a human that likes to create content and likes to share about science communication and wants to connect people to the ocean and wants to help people get involved in marine conservation. But I am just a person. Like, give me some grace.
I agree with you there. You know, that's one thing that somebody told me when I first started. I was asking, I was changing up my intro one of the times I was doing my podcast, and I was asking for feedback. And I had a good friend of mine. She always helps me out in terms of like what I should go with, and like kind of just confirms some of the things that I want to do. And she was always like, give us a little bit of tidbit of like your personality, like what's going on in your life, like what do you like? Which is, it's so funny because I interview people to get that personality out, like what they're like. I want people to know how cool our scientists are. And like they're like everybody else, they're human beings, you know, and they love certain things. They don't like certain things. And this is who they are. And that's the fun part of it. But I never really thought of it for myself until I get reminded, like, hey, you know what, throw a little bit of like what's going on in your life, how the kids, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so every once in a while I'll throw something down because it humanizes you.
Yeah.
People are listening to you, whether they're watching you on TikTok or listening through the podcast. You're in their ears, right? You're in their eyes on a regular basis. And so they tend to have that like almost like a loyalty to you, but like you're like, you're an influence. I guess that's where influencer came from, but you're an influence in how they think about marine science and having that personality. I really like. I loved the videos of you going back to Hawaii.
Thank you.
That was really, I felt that was really special. And just because you're like, you can tell you love it just from the podcast, but before I knew you loved it just from that video because you're like, it was a while since you had been back and you wanted to spend time with your friends, and you're talking about couldn't see everybody. It was a little chaotic, but it's always fun. I like that part because it does show that personality. Yes, you know a ton about marine science and you're willing to share everything, but yeah, you got to get to know the McKenzie, right? That's the best part of it all, and I think that's important because then it allows people to be like, oh, well, yeah, don't go attacking her. She's just doing what she's doing. She's just doing what she loves. So let her do that. And I think that's really important. I got to ask, just as we kind of wrapping up here, and you and I could probably talk for like 3 hours just on science communication alone. Coming up, you've had, there's been probably opportunities presented. You talked about like a management team now that you have. Where do you want to take your science communication? Like, how do you want to, like, I know, like I've been on your website, it talks a lot about science communication. Where do you want to go with all of this?
Well, right now I am like waiting to hear about a graduate program that I've applied
yes, that's
for.
Right.
And so
crossing fingers, by the way.
Thank you. I'm very nervous. It would be a big transition in my life. And so that is something that I would like to take my audience along with me and what that looks like. So that's kind of what I did a graduate diploma. So it was just a 1 year in fisheries and aquaculture, and it's allowing me to apply for this program. And it would be a big move, big transition. And so big decisions. And so I am, kind of just kind of waiting. And I like to share about that. And I think that's kind of where I see myself going, is sharing more of my research and what I'm doing actively in the field.
Nice.
I still I've made, in the pandemic, when I was a little bit, like I was, taking care of my grandma, I wasn't as active in actual research. I, got to make really fun videos, like what octopus you are based on your zodiac sign and all these sorts of things. And I really loved doing that. And I would like to continue doing that. But I also think that seeing a queer woman actually actively doing research and what that involves and all is also really important. And that's kind of where I want to start leaning into. So yes, I still want to make fun science communication videos, but I also want to bring people in to the research a little bit more. Last year I was doing research at a lab that wasn't as open to science communication. And so I didn't get to share as much as what I was doing. And now the paper is kind of in production and it will be published this year. That's kind of what I've been working on lately is getting that paper ready. And so once it's published, I'll be able to kind of talk about it a little bit more. But just because of the nature of the lab and what they kind of do.
Sometimes you can't.
Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's not something that's going to be discussed. That's the nature of things. That's just kind of the honesty of things. But the lab that I applied for, the graduate program that I applied for, they're very open. Their whole basis is, it is climate change and fisheries and all of these sorts of things. That's their main focus, but also they have a real emphasis on science communication. And the advisor has, talked to me about it and is very open to me sharing my experiences, which was really important for me when I was applying for this graduate program. So that's kind of where I want to go is yes, still have those kind of fun pieces, still be educating, but also be showing what life is really like. That, yes, marine science can be really fun. And yes, it is an incredible career. I love it with all my heart, but it is not just like playing with dolphins and going for swimmies. It is also like a lot of, that'd be great. That'd be great. Yeah. There's also like a lot of science involved. There's a lot of sitting behind my computer. There's a lot of sitting right here at this spot on this laptop, looking out this window of how beautiful of a day it is and being like, I don't get to go outside because I have to write this freaking grant. I have to sit here and code some R. Fun.
That's always fun. People love R. There's never been a bad word said before.
No, we would never speak down about R ever. So, like that, I think that reality is also good. When I first got involved in science communication, I found people like always talked about like the benefits of marine science. And there was always these videos that were like marine science. And it's like, there's dolphins and there's ocean and there's all these things and they're going for dives and they're all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, yes. But also I think that we should like tell people that like, that's not all of it. A lot of it is analyzing all your data, is office time, is sitting in a lab. It is waiting for your PCR to run. It is waiting for your experiment to be conducted. It's all of these things that are not as glamorous. And so that's one of the things I started talking about that I think people really connected to, because I was like, it's underfunded. It can be really tough. We still deal
competitive.
Oh, it's competitive. It's so competitive. Yeah. It's very much who you know. It's, and a lot of times you're up against your friends, which does not feel good. You're going up against people that you're working, that you've worked with, that you've studied with. Yep. It is not all fishies and dolphins. It is hard. And so that's kind of one of the things that I've talked about previously that people really connected to, and people really thankful for that. And I've gotten a lot of messages of people being like, thank you for that. Like, I really want to get into marine science, but I didn't realize that there was all of these other aspects. And I'm like, no, I'm glad that you were able to understand that. And so that's kind of where I want to keep going. I want to keep educating, keep talking, keep bringing people, connecting people to the ocean, giving them that like sense of care, giving them that ability to want to be involved in marine conservation. I always think that's the most important part. If I can teach you about a new animal that, oh my God, you're obsessed with that animal. Okay, cool. In order to protect that animal, we have to do all of these things as well. There's pieces that are important.
Here's the nature of it.
Exactly. So I always will do that. I will always keep doing that. But also I'm really excited to share a little bit more about what the world really looks like and what all those things are aspects. So we'll know in a few weeks, hopefully.
and I know it's going to turn out well. I have those.
Thank you.
Can feel it. You deserve it. You definitely deserve it. All the decisions you've made to get to where you're at, they've been for a reason. You are an amazing scientist. The way you speak about science is amazing. And you can tell there's a lot of passion in there. So, fingers crossed, but I'm very confident that you'll get this, and we can't wait to see.
Thank you.
I'm going to speak on behalf of the audience here. We can't wait to see what you're going to come up with next,
Thank you.
and the content you're going to make after you get this. So I can't wait to see that content. So it's going to be a lot of fun to be able to see that, and I know it's going to happen. I know it. And you deserve it. It has to be in the cards. You deserve it. So, but anyway, look, this has been fantastic. I'd love to invite you back on another time to be able to talk more, and then maybe we'll talk more about what's going to happen with your graduate work. That'll be fun. But it's also, if you want to check out McKenzie, it's let me just make sure I have it right. It's McKensea. SEA at the end. So MCKENCE or SEA. I can't spell. I'll put in the link so everybody can see it. But check out the TikTok and the same handle for Instagram, correct?
There's an underscore because somebody stole.
We'll put that in there too to make sure
somebody stole my username. I've tried to argue with Instagram about it for years now to let me have it because it's an account that nobody uses. It's a private account that's never had anything on it, and I'm like, please just give it to me.
Yeah, that's the worst. Just justice. You need justice. But no, I think this is great. I want people to check it out and let us know how you feel about it. Reach out to you if they want to get more. They want to have a question about an animal. I'm sure you'll be able to answer it. And I'll go on the list of things to be able to answer. But
absolutely,
McKenzie, McKenzie, this has been amazing. I really appreciate you coming. Like I said, this has been on my bucket list for a while, and I'm just really happy to have you on. And I would love to have you back on anytime.
Of course. I would love to be back on. This was very fun.
You bet. Thank you, McKenzie, for joining us on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. It was great to be able to get to know you, to get to know how you got to where you are, how you got so many followers, and just the amount of effort you put into each of those pieces of science communication on every platform. I just think it's fantastic. I don't think we realize how much work goes into creating content these days, and to be able to create good content, whether it's a video that you put up for 5 minutes and it goes viral, or it's a video you spend 45 minutes to 2 hours on editing and making sure there's enough B-roll to keep people engaged and to inform people of what there's to do. It is harder than you think. Trust me, as a content creator, it is not easy to put everything you need to put to make it not only to balance the entertainment value, the education value, and the conservation value. It's a lot of work. And I just love how McKenzie will sort of stand up for herself online. When you put yourself out as a content creator, you put yourself out to criticism. And some criticism, for me, especially like when I get criticism, it's valid. Sometimes they're like, oh yeah, I missed a little piece, or I could have added to that piece. And it's valid to acknowledge, either in another video or in the comments. But then there are some times when they just come for your throat for no reason. And you have to stand up for yourself. There's sometimes you have to wait, and there's sometimes you have to stand up for yourself. And sometimes you have to get emotional, and sometimes you don't. And it's just really hard to balance that. And making sure that you have people in your life to kind of spitball certain ideas of how to respond, making sure that you're calm and collective, and making sure you take that 24-hour rule, in my case anyway, or take a couple of hours just to wait and be able to respond, because you don't want to get too emotional around it in terms of not making your case because you're not thinking the way you want to think, right? That's really what it goes down to. But the way McKenzie is able to balance that is phenomenal. The way she sometimes will, as she mentions, be a little more emotional or sometimes not emotional and just respond in a scientific way and in a conservation way or an educational way, I just think it's phenomenal. And, some of the topics, especially when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community and some of the things that she's probably heard and the responses that she's had in a negative way, that will get you there. And it's very difficult to watch people have to listen to that and have to go through that. But the way she responds, I have utmost respect for it. So I really love the way she does her content. So follow her. I'll put the links in the show notes. Follow her on TikTok, on Instagram. I'll put the link in the show notes. I want you guys to get to know McKenzie like I get to know McKenzie. It was a real pleasure to have her on the podcast. And I can't wait to have her back again to listen to some more educational content, as well as find out more about her and what she's up to. So thank you again, McKenzie. And I want to thank you for listening. I would love to know what you think of the type of topics that McKenzie covers, how she covers them. If you know her, you've been a follower for her for a while, I'd love to know what made you follow her, what made you Love her content. And if you have any comments on the way we do content, love to hear those thoughts as well. So just make a comment on the YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can hit me up on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. Or go to speakupforblue.com where we have everything. You can get in contact with us. We have a contact page, or you can just put the comment just right on the episode page. But I want to thank you again for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin from the True North Strong and Free. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon, and happy conservation.